St. Clement's Church is located in Pyatnitskaya Street in the historic center of Moscow. The majestic building with its light blue domes can be seen from afar. This is one of Moscow's most famous churches and a unique example of Baroque church architecture, from Italian La Perla Barocco meaning imperfect pearl. The church boasts iconostases which are atypical of Orthodox architecture. The gilded wooden central iconostasis with its sculptures is second to none in Moscow. If you look at St. Clement's Church from the outside, the lower two tiers resemble a Baroque palace. The total surface area of the church is nearly 1,500 square meters. The church consists of a prayer hall with 5 side altars, a refectory with 2 side altars, and a bell tower. The church is an architectural monument of national importance, and is therefore part of the Golden Ring, a ring of cities northeast of Moscow, that preserve the memory of the most important and significant events in Russian history: excursion and pilgrimage route. Saint Clement was one of the 70 apostles, the 4th bishop of Rome. Back in his era, the Christian church had not yet split into Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches. According to legend, Clement was ordained a bishop of Rome by Saint Peter himself. He was persecuted by the Roman Emperor Trajan and exiled to the Crimean stone quarries. However, he never stopped delivering sermons and even organized divine and baptismal services for pagans, for which the Romans ordered him to be drowned in 103. His remains were later discovered by his disciples at the bottom of the sea, whose shores had retreated to reveal them. Saint Clement was regarded as a patron saint in Kievan Rus. Part of his remains was deposited by Vladimir the Great, the ruler from 980 to 1015, who converted Kievan Rus to Christianity in 988 in the Church of the Tithes. The church's history goes back to the 17th century, when one of the battles during the time of troubles period of political crisis in Russia that followed the demise of the Rurik dynasty and ended with the establishment of the Romanov dynasty took place by a small fortress built by Cossacks, a group of predominantly East Slavic-speaking people who became known as members of democratic, self-governing, semi-military communities next to the wooden church of St. Clement. Klementovsky Ostrozhek, Clement's Little Ostrog, a Russian term for a small fort, became an outpost in the fight against the invaders and a symbol of the Orthodox soldiers' stamina in 1612. During the course of heavy combat, Russian Cossacks managed to drive the troops of Hetman Chodkiewicz, who was racing to the rescue of a Polish garrison stuck in the Kremlin. This victory was the first step to the liberation of Moscow and Russia from foreign invasion. It is believed that a Duma clerk, a ministerial title from that time called Alexander Turov, later constructed the first small church stone building as an expression of his gratitude to the Lord for his miraculous escape. Sentenced to death during the reign of Michael I, the first Russian Tsar of the House of Romanov after the Zemsky Sobor of 1613 of Russia, the clerk prayed in his prison cell before an icon of Our Lady of the Sign and had a vision that he would be granted pardon. The penalty, indeed, was soon removed because the Tsar had had the same vision. According to the most widely accepted version of events, the existing 5-domed church was built in the mid-18th century by one of Moscow's richest merchants, Kozma Matveyev, who had an estate in Pyatnitskaya Street. Another version of the story goes that the construction was ordered by Count Alexei Bestuzhev, a field marshal and the chancellor of the Russian Empire, who lived nearby. St. Clement's Day, which fell on the 25th of November 1741, witnessed a palace revolution that swept Elizabeth Petrovna, the Empress of Russia, from 1741 until 1761 into power. From that point onwards, St. Petersburg and Moscow began to build churches consecrated to St. Clement. The person who designed the church is also unknown. Legend has it that it was the famous Pietro Antonio Trezzini, a Swiss architect. Peter the Great ruled from 1682 until 1725's godson and the author of many palaces and churches in St. Petersburg. The bell tower, differing in style, was constructed by Prince Dmitry Yukhtomsky, the chief architect of Moscow. It was on pure luck that St. Clement's Church survived through the Soviet era. Its property, except for the icons, was liquidated and transferred to the treasury in the 1920s, and the church itself was intended to be demolished during the next decade. The fence and the pavilion fulfilling the role of the Holy Gate had already been demolished, when two famous restorers, Professor Pyotr Baranovsky and the academic Igor Grabar, stood up for the church, which was ultimately granted a reprieve from its planned destruction and was subsequently used as storage for the books from the Lenin Library Russian. This may be regarded as divine providence, as Saint Clement is considered to be the patron saint of books and science. The church was transferred to the Russian Orthodox Church in 2008, and the subsequent renovation project became an important page in the life of Moscow clergy. The vibrant architectural language of the Moscow Baroque style manifested itself in the church iconostasis and interior design. It is not for nothing that art historians compare it to the Façade Prax in Trubetskoy, rare example of Moscow's luxuriant Elizabethan Baroque-style house in Pokrovka, Russian Street and other Moscow Baroque structures. The icons in the central iconostasis may have been painted by Vasily Vasilevsky and Dmitry Levitsky, who are known to have worked on similar iconostases in churches in Ordinka, Russian. The northern, left, side altar of the refectory is consecrated to the Most Holy Theotokos, the unburnt bush icon, Russian, placed left of the royal doors and protecting the church from fire. The southern, right, side altar of the refectory is consecrated to Saint Clement and Pope Peter I of Alexandria. This side altar occupies the place of the original church, next to which Polish and Russian troops battled in 1612 as a sequence of military conflicts and eastward invasions carried out by the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The main part of the building contains 5 side altars, which is rare in Moscow church architecture. The church icon of Saint Clement is normally placed on an analogon. Ancient 18th century icons are kept in kiosks, a decorated case or glass shelf for keeping and displaying religious icons placed against the walls under the arches. The majority of the church was constructed in 1770 in the style typical of Western European church architecture. Angel statues are placed on pedestals at the level of the second tier, and icons are in the style of 18th century Italian art and encased in luxurious frames. The church was the first in Moscow to use the kiot iconostasis structure, where all the 5 altars of the central part are connected with a single iconostasis. The iconostasis in St. Peter and Paul Cathedral, Russian, Petropavlovsky Sobor in St. Petersburg, resembles the one at St. Clement's. 2 more altars, the Nativity of Mary altar and the Ascension altar, are placed in the choir stalls, which can be accessed via a staircase. These were damaged significantly during the Soviet times due to their placement under a leaky roof.
you.